Bledsoe was arrested.
Patrick Montgomery was in court.
Jonathan Manapa will stay in federal custody.
No, I don't take responsibility at all.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. So 32-year-old Virginia resident Zachary Alam is one that you guys are going to remember. On January 6th of 2021, Alam was seen on the Capitol grounds. He was helping people scale Capitol walls. He was then seen entering the Capitol. He walked in just 5 minutes after the initial breach of the Senate wing doors. He climbed through a broken window, headed to the Capitol crypt, and he was seen screaming at officers. Then Alam jumped on an elevator. He went up to the 4th floor first. He was seen on video. He was attempting to kick in an office door on that floor. He then headed down to the 3rd floor, and while he was on the staircase, he was seen peering over the railing, and he threw a red velvet rope down at the officers that were down below him. From there, he made his way down to the 2nd floor, and that's where he joined a large group of people who they were trying to reach the House chamber. So Alam was seen and heard cursing at the police. He was yelling encouragement to the mob. He was so out of control, in fact, that other members of the mob tried to calm him down. They were trying to pull him back and away from the police. Well, at that point, though, the majority of the group surged forward, and so he joined them, and Alam pushed forward, and after the crowd was able to get to a set of doors, which you guys will remember, these are the set of doors that had been barricaded with furniture, and officers were standing there with guns pointed through the broken glass. So the mob wasn't able to breach those doors at that location. So they moved around to the other area where the House members were holed up. At least some of them, were still holed up. But they moved over to the area of the Speaker's lobby doors. And this was just as the members of the House were being evacuated. And you might remember this from photos and from videos that were taken that day, but Trump's terrorists could see the Congress members fleeing through the glass insets on the doors, and so they just lost it. They became completely enraged. There were only 3 officers, you might recall, standing guard in front of those doors, and so Alam maneuvered to the front of the crowd, got in the officers' faces, and he was screaming, quote, "I'm going to fuck you up." And then he started pushing his body against 2 of the officers, and he was reaching around their heads, and he was repeatedly punching the glass on the doors. So he shattered the doors, he shattered the glass on the doors, and then Alam turned to the mob. He tried to draw their attention to the Congress members. Eventually, more heavily armed officers and who had protective gear on, they arrived as backup because the 3 officers standing guard pretty much didn't have anything to protect them. And so those 3 officers started to move away from the doors so that they could allow the other more heavily armed officers to take over. Well, before the more heavily armed officers were able to get in place, Alam started kicking the doors. This is all on video, by the way. So at that point, another member of the mob handed Alam a helmet. So he started using and he was smashing the helmet into the glass on the doors. He managed to break through the glass on 2 of those doors. And that is when, Ashley Babbitt had her fateful moment. She attempted to pull herself up and climb through one of those shattered or broken windows. As we all know, officers were on the other side of the door inside the House chamber still, and they were saying, "Don't come through, stand down, we'll shoot." She didn't listen. They shot her. She passed away. So at that point, the officers ushered everyone out of the area. And as Alam was leaving, he was seen and heard on video. He was yelling to the mob, quote, "We need guns, bro. We need guns." Sometime after that, though, he did leave the Capitol, and according to the government, he immediately started to plot how he was going to get out of the country. So he knew he was busted. When Alam was arrested by the FBI, they said they found, quote, evidence of his flight and his plans to dispose of evidence. They also found Alam's journal, and apparently in that journal, he had detailed his plans to flee the country, to change his identity. He wrote about buying cryptocurrency, opening a new bank account, deleting Facebook photos. This was like a to-do list. He also mentioned trading his truck for a car, installing a virtual private server on his computer, and then getting IDs and clothing from some storage unit. So Alam also had a magazine with him. It was called Off the Grid. And on the front cover, there was an article titled, quote, Riot Response Survive and Succeed During Civil Unrest. And they found that Alam had started using a burner phone right after the Capitol attack. So he was arrested on January 30th of 2021, and in a superseding indictment, Alam was charged with assaulting officers, civil disorder, destruction of government property, obstructing an official proceeding, entering a restricted building with a deadly or dangerous weapon, 2 counts of disorderly conduct, one of which also had the dangerous weapon enhancement, 2 counts of physical violence, again, one of those also had the dangerous weapon enhancement, and parading or demonstrating in a Capitol building. I don't know if the prosecutor offered Alam a plea deal, but he ended up going to trial. And in September of 2023, the jury found Alam guilty on all counts. Based on all of the convictions combined, Alam was facing up to decades in prison and on probation, well over $1 million in fines as well. And this time the government requested a pretty hefty sentence. So they asked for more than what the federal sentencing guidelines allowed. They asked for 136 months in prison, so just over 11 years, also 3 years of probation and $4,484 in restitution, presumably for the doors. You will not be surprised to hear he has quite a lengthy criminal history. So Alam has been arrested 20 times. Just to give you a few examples, in 2014, he was charged and ultimately sentenced for driving under the influence. 2015, he was charged for being drunk in public. A couple months after that one, Alam was charged and convicted of possession of weed. He violated his probation in that case, and he ended up having to pay a fine. Then in January of 2017, Alam was arrested twice. So the first time it was for unauthorized use of a vehicle. For that, he was sentenced to prison for a very brief period of time. That same month, he was charged and convicted for leaving the scene after a collision that caused property damage and injury to an animal. Also, in that same incident, he was hit with driving under the influence of alcohol or drugs. For those crimes, he received only a suspended sentence. Wonder why he keeps committing crimes, huh? The very next month after that, Alam was charged and later convicted of petty larceny. The following year, 2018 now, he was charged and later convicted for possession of an open container of alcohol. And in 2019, he was charged and later convicted of fare evasion. And the prosecutor mentioned he had 3 additional arrests that didn't result in charges for stealing bicycles. In one instance, they said Alam tried to steal a Metro Transit bike, and he had an outstanding warrant at that time for another crime. So, real winner, another one of Trump's real winners. And Alam's sentencing hearing, as you would imagine after all this, pretty interesting to say the least. He told the judge, quote, "I know that breaking windows is against the law, but I believed in my heart I was doing the right thing. Sometimes you have to break the rules to do what's right. Some J6ers did violence, but only because they thought they were saving the country in the process." And then Alam said, quote, 4 years later, Americans were able to rectify the situation. So he was referring to Donald Trump's recent election. And Alam also said he had heard about Trump's talk of pardons, but he claims, quote, "I will not accept a second-class pardon. I want a full pardon with all the benefits that come with it, including full compensation." And again, I know a lot of you are saying, oh, why even bother with these cases? Trump is just going to pardon all of them when he gets into office. First of all, I don't trust a word out of Donald Trump's mouth. We all know how much he lies, so I will believe that when I see it. But second, these people are still being arrested and still being sentenced. So I'm going to cover these cases until. At the very least, some of them are going to prison and they'll sit there until, if Donald Trump pardons them. And they're also having to put out money for attorney's fees and going through the hassle of getting an attorney and going to court. And so, yeah, they're paying some sort of price. So I'm happy to report on these. I will do so until. U.S. District Judge Dabney Friedrich presided over Alam's case, and she said officers remembered him because, quote, "he was by far the loudest, the most combative, and the most violent of the January 6 rioters." And the judge went on to say, quote, "Without question, Mr. Alam's actions substantially contributed to the threatening circumstances that led to the officer to use lethal force." So, in other words, he is responsible. He is responsible in some small way or big way for the death of Ashley Babbitt. I would love to know what her mother thinks of Zachary Alam potentially getting a pardon. And then the judge said, quote, "Your continued defense of your actions suggests to the court that deterrence is critically important in this case." So in the end, Judge Friedrich sentenced Alam to 8 years in prison, 3 years of probation, and she ordered him to pay that $4,484 in restitution. So she did end up going above the high end of the federal sentencing guidelines. For anyone who's followed these cases with me, for Judge Friedrich especially, who is a Donald Trump appointee, this is a huge deal. This is probably the longest sentence she has ever given out. She's usually very weak. Now, Alam will receive credit. He has already spent almost 4 years in prison. Because he was one of the violent ones, he has been locked up since his arrest, and he's been awaiting trial. Also, the judge recommended that he be placed in a federal medical facility so that he can get some mental health treatment, which I think is a very good thing. So overall, I think this is a really good sentencing. It's one of the longest, especially for not being part of the militia. I doubt that this guy is going to keep himself out of trouble. So even if Trump does pardon him, I can almost guarantee we're going to be hearing more about him in the future. Anyway, and again, even if Trump pardons him, he's already spent, by the time Trump is in office, he will have spent a full 4 years in prison. So anyway, I will let you all know if or when I hear more. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Please like, please share, and subscribe. Please donate if you can. Love you all. Take care. Talk with you soon.